I want to play something for you to help you to understand the times. It comes from Democracy Now! It was posted on yesterday on the 9th. There is a man here, so I want you to listen to what Amy Goodman is saying, and then I want you to listen to what Mikey Weinstein has to say. He's an attorney for U.S. military, and he specifically has a niche in religious freedom, like religious liberty. He works for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, I think is what it's called. In any event, I've seen him before. I have posted documentaries with him in those documentaries before, in which he talks about what is being taught to the United States military regarding the end times, regarding Armageddon, regarding, Trump being supposedly anointed by Jesus, and the complaints that he's been receiving from active military, and the agenda put forth by the United States at the behest of Israel. Do you understand that there is a reason why this is being pitched to the United States military? Because they are going to be involved and trained by, who do you think? Who do you think they're going to be trained by, guys? Maybe the worship or the image that the United States worships? You think? You think the IDF might be training them since they're already training ICE? You need to know the times. You need to understand what's about to happen. And I posted a video just a short while ago regarding what God woke me up with this morning, which was wine left on its dregs. Dregs are the sediment at the bottom of wine. And God uses this metaphor to describe a people who are complacent and lazy. You need to wake up and understand that you are supposed to take action on the message that I'm speaking, not just sit there like a wicked and lazy servant with your mouth open like a little bird, eating up the things that I say, but you don't put them into practice. That will not be to your credit. Now, I do not agree with everything that Mikey Weinstein is going to say, so I'm going to interject and I'm going to tell you what the actual truth is based on the word. I'm not using him as an expert. What I'm using is the testimony of a person who is putting their butt out on the line to share the phone calls that he's getting. That doesn't mean that he has total truth about end times. If he doesn't acknowledge Christ, he doesn't acknowledge the word, then he doesn't have truth. But his testimony about the calls that he's getting, that's worth something. And he's not sharing that testimony and being rewarded by the evil powers that are. He receives death threats for the work that he's doing. Now listen to what's being shared.
Christian rhetoric about biblical end times, selling the conflict to American troops as a holy war. The watchdog Military Religious Freedom Foundation says it's been inundated with more than 200 complaints from members across all branches of the U.S. military regarding these comments. One combat unit commander reportedly said the war is part of God's divine plan, and that, quote, President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to...
By the way, light the signal fire. What in the world does that mean? These are just people who make up their own doctrines and their own language, and you can't find it in the Bible. And so people who listen to man, that's where they get their gospel from. They don't know the word. They eat this stuff up, and then they think, oh, well, I'm just not very smart. I have to go to the Father to tell me what to think. I've got to go to some priest or pastor. That's not true. Now, sorry about that. The picture that, please feel free to go and pull this up yourself. It's Democracy Now! Posted on March 9th on YouTube. It's entitled, U.S. Commanders Accused of Promoting Holy War Against Iran. There is a picture here of all of the, usual suspects. All the people who were prophesying and doing all of this stuff when saying that Donald Trump was going to win last time, and then he didn't, and it was just crickets. No one came forth and said, well, guess we don't know how to prophesy. Guess we were liars. Paula White, bunch of Israeli handlers, and fake pastors who showed up to lay hands on Trump and, anoint the pedophile, rapist, adulterer that they claim Jesus has anointed. Okay. This is a sick brood of people. Okay, so Amy Goodman is saying there have been complaints coming in over them claiming that Donald Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire for Armageddon to begin. As I've explained to you before, Armageddon does not happen until after the resurrection. You see that when Jesus returns, he's returning with his bride. He's returning with those who went up in the first resurrection. So I don't know what these people think they're doing, but if they're preparing for Armageddon, first of all, the word tells us that those who are rounding up for Armageddon are evil spirits. They're demonic spirits. Read it. Second of all, they are gathering for Armageddon to fight against God's people. And when God and his bride come back, Jesus is slaying them with the double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. Anyone who's left here for Armageddon is the Antichrist. Okay, so this is it. Go ahead and take a picture. That is the Antichrist kingdom.
Unquote. For more, we go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we're joined by Mikey Weinstein, founder and president of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. In this last 5 minutes we have, Mikey, if you can talk about the complaints you've received and who are these commanders who are saying this is a holy war?
Yes, Amy. Our foundation, our main purpose is to protect the wall separating church and state in the technologically most lethal organization ever created by our species, which is the U.S. military. As soon as the war began last Saturday, a week ago, this past Saturday, we started getting inundated by calls from members of the military indicating that supervisors and commanders across the branches, both in the CONUS, which is the continental United States, and internationally, were invoking the fact that this was great news. They were gleeful. They were joyful. They were euphoric because this was a signal that pursuant to the Christian eschatological aspects of the end times in the book of Revelation, that all of this was serving as, if you will, an accelerant or lubricant to bring their version of weaponized Jesus back, which I will also make it clear includes a metric of a 200-mile-long river, 4.5 feet deep, Amy, filled with nothing but the human blood of those that their version of Jesus is slaughtered at the Battle of Armageddon.
Okay, so first of all, this is the ideology that is supposed to be now driving the war in Iran, driving our U.S. military, is that they are pushing Armageddon, that they are involved in pushing Armageddon and going after opponents, which would be, maybe that was laid out in NSPM 7, do you think? Do you think that might have been? That might be who they're going to go after, and maybe they're going to root out those who are not in with this. Like, you're either with us or you're against us kind of thing. This is the ideology pushing that. Erica Kirk, from what I understand, has just been given a position in the Air Force. I didn't realize they hired prostitutes. Honeypots from Israel. I didn't realize that was a thing, but okay. And now let's just talk about the ideology. So he's saying that some river is going to be full of blood. It doesn't say that in Revelation. It says that up to the horse's bridle. So I guess they had to make up their own doctrine so that they could fulfill it. I don't know. Because, it would be kind of difficult to, fill the earth up to the horse's bridle, I guess. So they're just making up their doctrine, as they do, and then expecting God to fulfill it.
So we were getting 15, 20, 25 calls a day the first several days that we were out there. We finally broke this story with journalist Jonathan Larson, and then it went viral. And so what we are reporting now is that we have over 200, complaints, and that we have, from 50 different installations. But it's terrifying when you try to put a theological perspective from Christian extremism with what's happening right now, particularly having listened to your whole show today. I'm reminded of the second inaugural speech by...
Before he goes into that, I would just like to say what an offense it is for anyone to be referring to this as Christian extremism. None of these things are in the Bible. There's nothing Christian about what they're saying. But this continues to be a reproach for us, a humiliation for those of us who know the word and are actually Christian, which are very few of those calling themselves Christian.
Abraham Lincoln, when he chastised both sides in the Civil War for trying to say that God was on their side, which exacerbated the violence, the bloodshed, the injuries, and the death.
Last month, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth invited the controversial Christian nationalist pastor Doug Wilson to lead the Pentagon's prayer service. Wilson's opposed Muslims holding public office and does not believe women should be allowed to vote.
That's kind of a weird thing, right? Because Deborah was a judge in Israel, so obviously women are allowed to like hold positions, and if they're allowed to hold positions, they're certainly allowed to vote or have a say in things. But this is a misogynistic, crazy, I don't even know what to call them anymore other than demonic. It just is completely anti-biblical. It's anti-Christ.
Can you talk about Hegseth's tenure as head of the defense, what Trump calls the War Department, and what concerns you most about his conflation of church and state?
I was warned by your producers not to cuss. So I will refer to Hegseth as a piece of feces as opposed to the regular word. He's viewed by senior leadership as a bully and a poser. He is nothing but a Christian nationalist lackey. You forgot to mention, or I'll mention that Doug Wilson also believes that the Civil War was justified biblically. And of course, that a lot of slave owners, he reminds everybody, had a really nice relationship, with their slaves, the same way they did with their living room furniture. He believes that the Jews killed Jesus. Muslims have no right to participate.
Okay, let's just talk about that. Do we not know the truth from the word? Jews handed Jesus over to the Romans to be killed. Jesus addressed this with Pilate and said that they are guilty for handing him over, that they're more guilty for handing him over. And of course, the false translation is that the one who handed him over is more guilty. No, all of them who handed him over, and I'm not talking about all Jews because the first Christians were Jews, so this isn't a matter of some group. There was a group of people within them who handed Jesus over to be killed. They are guilty. You think that they're not guilty because they weren't the ones who nailed him to the cross? You think they weren't guilty because they didn't want to be around the dead bodies so that they could eat the Passover? It's a pretty stupid way of thinking, that you're going to be innocent killing the Son of God or killing anyone or handing anybody over to the Romans to be killed. But if you're not around a dead body, you'll be able to eat the Passover. Yeah, it's not going to work out that way for you. Obviously, Mikey Weinstein is a Jew. Maybe he doesn't want to admit that. I'm not here to put anyone up on a pedestal. I don't really care. I'm not platforming him for any other reason other than he has some information for us.
Participate in government, and if you're LGBTQIA+, you probably don't have a right to live. The bottom line is, Hegseth has created a template that the only approved member of the U.S. military is to be straight, white, Christian nationalist, and male. So why is anybody surprised that with that template going down in a hierarchical organization, tribal, adversarial, communal, and ritualistic like the U.S. military, that you have subordinate commanders, all of whom are trying to get promoted, that are following the exact same thing? We saw this happen before when the Israeli Defense Forces moved into Gaza and started attacking the Palestinians. We had, in a much smaller way, we had commanders saying, well, this is also sparking the Battle of Armageddon. But whenever you attach an extremist aspect of any religious faith, that machinery, Amy, of the faith responsible for war, we do not end up with little creeks, streams, ponds, or lakes, Amy. We end up with one thing: oceans and oceans of blood, like the color of my shirt.
We have 20 seconds. What risks do service members face for reporting religious comments made by U.S. commanders?
If they do that officially, they become essentially what we call a tarantula on a wedding cake. Amy, you and I have been to lots of weddings. Tarantulas on wedding cakes, that doesn't bode well for the tarantula or the wedding cake.
Okay, so that's it. That's the narrative that's being pushed by the United States military on what they need to do. NSPM 7 has not disappeared, guys. This is part of the entire picture and the agenda going into effect. I've told you now for years that these things that you're seeing in Gaza, that the ways that you're seeing people being treated, the treatment of journalists who oppose Israel or protesters who oppose Israel, get ready to be the next Gaza. You're not exempt from any of this. But this was supposed to be a sign to you, as the covenant states, that when God sends these things, you need to return to him. And I've begged you to do it. I've begged you to do it on this channel for the last 4 years, and you haven't done it. These things are unprecedented. At the very least, you should be looking at these things wondering, okay, what is it that God's doing? If you believe in God, isn't that supposed to be the question in your heart? What is God doing? If you believe in his covenant and you know his word, aren't you supposed to know that when he sends these things that you have to return to him and that you need to discern the times and that you're a hypocrite if you don't? That's exactly what Jesus said, that you know how to discern whether it's going to rain, but you don't know how to discern the times? Where are you guys? Go discern it with him.